Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I am so excited for today's episode, not only because today's guest is extraordinary at so many different things, but really, as soon as I landed on her website, I saw one basic sentence that I thought, yes, that's the premise of life and business and success. We need to embrace that. And that one sentence quite simply said, thriving organizations start with thriving leaders. And today's guest is so fascinated and curious and interested and excellent at helping us to find our own inner thriving leaders so that we can succeed, so that we can lead, so that we can build great things. Let me introduce you to today's guest. Her name is Sarah Draper. Sarah is a leadership and resilience speaker, coach, and trainer who helps high-performing leaders master resilience, energy management, and recovery to sustain long-term success. Now, her background is quite frankly incredible. She has a background that spans West Point, the Army, and the FBI, and because of all of those things, Sarah understands high-pressure leadership environments firsthand. Through her company, Leading Well Strategies, Sarah equips leaders with practical tools to manage stress, avoid burnout, and lead with clarity and confidence. She delivers keynote speeches, executive coaching, and leadership development programs that challenge the traditional push harder mindset. We always hear about this hustle mindset, instead helping leaders build sustainable success through proactive resilience. Now, resilience is going to be a word that comes up so much in today's conversation, but I already know Sarah's going to invite us to think about the words we throw around so frequently a little bit differently. So I'm excited about this one. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Sarah Draper. All right, Sarah, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. I'm so happy to be here.
Heck yes. I know that you're going to bring the heat. I also know how intentional you are with your words. So we're really going to question a lot of beliefs and things that we constantly hear in today's episode. But before we get there, Sarah, take us beyond the bio. You have such an incredible background. I want to hear all about who's Sarah. How did you start doing all these cool things?
Oh my, I can't. Who's Sarah? You went through the bio pretty well, but Sarah's also a mom. I've got 2 teenagers. I'm a wife. I've got a background. It's a little different, a little varied probably than many people that end up in the entrepreneurship world, but I think it's a background driven by something that is since all of our hearts who are now in this entrepreneurial world is of service to others and to help others be their best. So my pathway into this was a little bit long, more than 3 decades before I landed where I am now. But I really do think everything kind of led up to that. All my challenges, all my struggles, all my growth points, all the different things I got to experience in life helped me kind of come to some truths about humans, leadership, how we can be our best and why it's so important, why those we lead, those we serve, those we love, and we deserve us to be living our best life. And you threw out thriving earlier, and I'll just say we spend a lot of our times, especially as we're building careers and balancing other demands in our lives, we spend a lot of our time kind of in survival mode, so surviving, and I help people get beyond that into thriving.
Yeah, I love that overview, Sarah, especially because a lot of people on the surface, they'll see things like the Army, they'll see things like the FBI, and they'll associate it with, all the physical imagery that we see on TV shows and in movies. And we just pertain the word resilience to that. It's just physically, you dig in, you push through things. But it sounds to me, and all the stuff I've seen about your work, is that you have a little bit of a different view of what resilience is, and most importantly, how we can master resiliency. It's a word that I see so much in your work is master resilience. What does resilience mean to you, and what does it look like to master resilience?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think there's so many different components to resilience, but I always like to go back to some type of literature, evidence-based, or researchers and give credit to those that have really done the work of measuring it, and then we can bring in our own experiences because that's just as important. There's the late Dr. Chris Peterson, for example, from University of Michigan. He was one of the founders of positive psychology. So this idea of thriving truly in your life, like living your best. How do you live the good life? How do you thrive in your life? His description once of resilience was the ability to struggle well. And so with that description, I began personally to understand, wow, like struggle doesn't mean I'm not gritty. Struggle doesn't mean I'm not capable. Struggle doesn't mean I have any deficiencies. It's actually only in that struggle that we grow. And for whatever your profession or your personal, your goals are, like, that's really important to recognize. We don't grow in our safe spot. We don't grow when we just do what we're comfortable with and what's always worked for us. We can get really good at that. But if we want to extend beyond that or into a new area, it really does take some struggle. So I love that. And then Dr. Michael Unger, who's a resiliency expert, truly from decades of research around the world, he has said that resilience is a lot of different components, but it's not just our own individual ruggedness. That is important, but it's also the resources we have. And so when we think about resources, we think about all the different things we have of support, including, and I think especially important, are relationships. And that gets into like Harvard's 86-year study on the adult study of human development and the importance of relationships. But bringing all this together, like resilience is truly our ruggedness, yes, our relationships, yes, our framing, our mindsets, yes. And then the third piece is kind of what I've discovered over time and really try to help people with is the work we do in advance of something. Resilience isn't just a trait we have. It's in advance, that preparation. So I call this pre-resilience, preparation for preparing your resilience. So preparation for whatever might lie ahead. Some of this is like practices, tools, activities that raise our baseline capacity. Others are identifying resources we might need and investing in those resources, again, relationships or something like that in advance. Others are identifying tools that work for us in the moment when something happens or when we need to be better tomorrow, knowing what tools work for us, again, before that those challenges arise, before that struggle comes. If we've raised our baseline, we've identified our relationships and resources, and then we've practiced the tools, we are going to be a lot better prepared for whatever comes to us.
Yeah, I love the way you articulate all this, Sarah, because you went straight to the struggle. Of course, it's an inevitable part of any and every journey, and it's something that we hear about in so many podcasts and TED Talks and in so many personal development books. But what I find really unique about the way that you talk about this and through your company is that you focus on something that I don't think regularly enters the conversation when we talk about leadership and resilience, and that is energy. Sarah, I don't often hear people talk about energy, but as someone who's naturally energetic and naturally outgoing and extroverted, I think about it all the time, is that's one of my superpowers. And I think about it in the sports world. How many times does it look like somebody's down and out? We've got movies like Rocky where what is the spark that gets him back into it? It's resilience, it's a lot of things, but also energy is part of this, and we can't ignore it. Talk to us about why energy factors so much into the work that you do.
Yeah, I mean, energy is something you can build, right? You can create that within you, and it's important so that you can bring your best self to whatever situation there is. But energy is also incredibly important between different people. Like, you can sense an energy from someone, and we can either lift each other up or stay the same or pull each other down, and you almost have a choice, right? We have some control over that based upon how we arrive in a situation and the work we've done in that situation. And so collectively, beyond just the individual side, again, I think the individual side is really important, but I believe strongly that very collectively, and this actually goes to the work of Dr. Kim Cameron from University of Michigan, talks about energy in leadership and positive organizational cultures. And so energy is incredibly important in the collective as well, because who we are as a species really does rely on one another, not just for survival, but for thriving as well. And so that's a choice we can make, as how we show up.
Yeah, with that said, I'm sure you hear the counter argument to that so many times where, and you're a mom, so you can speak to this way more than I can. I'm not a parent at this point, but I always hear from parent entrepreneurs that they're just like, well, yeah, I want to have energy, but life just drains me. There's a million different things on my plate. You talk about energy management, Sarah, so obviously you really suggest the fact that we can work on that. We can manage our energy. What's that look like, especially for all the millions of counter arguments that anyone could have, whether it be being a parent or having a 9-to-5 and starting your business as a side hustle? Life is draining in so many ways. How do we manage through all that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so a big part of that, and that's a really good question, because that is a kind of a key question for so many of us. A big part of that is really being clear on what your priorities are, getting clear on your boundaries. And boundaries is a word that is thrown around a lot, but I think it's important to know the impact of violating our own boundaries, right? It can create kind of these micro stresses for us. So if my boundary is here and I say I'm not going to do this, that, or the other, and then someone's like, I really need this, or please, or blah, 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 whatever, like pulls at me and makes me violate that boundary, I now have a little bit of added stress in my own life in another area. So getting clear on our boundaries, being practical with strategies to make sure we really do honor those, and then also being able to recognize there's some give and take when we have to violate that, like how we're going to go about it. But being clear on our boundaries, that could and is often beyond like a work context where someone needs something more from you. Often it's a time context where what we spend our time with. Time is not a renewable resource. Energy kind of is, but time is, when it's gone, it's gone. And so being really careful and intentional about how we spend our time. And I think all that leads into, on the wellness, well-being side, like how we honor and value our recovery. And so sleep is a really, really big one. I've worked with a number of people that are like, I don't have time for exercise. I don't have time for exercise. Don't have time for exercise. Knowing it's good for us. I should, whatever. Or I want to, still don't have time. But once we start to find these areas where we're probably not as efficient, we might be spending time in something that really isn't netting anything for us. I found people can get to bed earlier. Not always, right? But sometimes, for example, they'll get to bed a little earlier, which means they can get up a little earlier and get that workout fit in before everyone else starts pulling from them that day. And so that's a way, that your energy gets rebuilt, both the sleep and then through that exercise too. So energy is something that, yes, energy and time do go hand in hand. But I think we just have to be honest with ourselves about where we really do spend our time and what we really do give our energy to, or the physical energy and the mental energy. That can be done something like an energy audit. There's different tools available out there where you really look at, kind of track for a little bit of time and see what really takes from you and then what gives back to you.
Yeah, so I love that you interjected sleep into this as one of your many examples, because that's something that I find so unique about entrepreneurs is there's very few things we will sacrifice by choice sleep for in this life. Obviously, parents kind of don't have a choice there, but we don't really sacrifice sleep for our 9-to-5 jobs if we're not passionate about that. We'll just do the minimum. But entrepreneurs, we're a little bit different, that we are so driven in what it is that we're building and what it is that we're doing that we'll always find that time. And what I really struggled with, especially in my first, I'll call it 5 years probably as an entrepreneur, is knowing when enough is enough, because I could work on this stuff 24 hours a day for years and years on end. And for me personally, that ultimately led to burnout in 2013. So Sarah, my very difficult question to you is, how do we know when to call it a day? How do we know when rest is necessary versus our inclination as driven, ambitious entrepreneurs say, I'm going to dig in, I'm going to outwork everybody else in this moment?
Yeah, I think it's like when to call it a day. I love it. And thank you for bringing up about your own burnout story, because I think that is a really necessary and relevant example to what could happen. That's a very extreme case, but and many of us, unfortunately, a huge number of people are getting there right now. Even if you're not there specifically, right, you're probably not performing your best if you're shortcutting on the sleep side. And so some of that is just figuring out who you are at your best. And some of it is very straightforward, like math almost. I mean, it's not necessarily math, but figure out what number of hours of sleep, going back to the sleep example, what number of hours of sleep you need to be at your best. And then if you work on cleaning up some sleep hygiene and things like that, a little aside, but so important, but just hours of sleep, figuring out, hey, how many do I really need? Like if you went off camping for 3 nights, what would you finally be sleeping at that third or fourth night, right? 3 or 4 nights, how much would you be sleeping with no interruptions out there, just you and nature? Where would you fall at? 6, 8, 7, 9, whatever it is for you. And then setting your wake up time. And then just doing the math backwards, right? That wake up time, a consistent wake up time is incredibly important for how our body functions overall. And then setting that to bedtime and then adding in before that bedtime, like an hour or so for a wind down, maybe 30 minutes for some, but I think many of us need or take longer. And then it's just like, that's a harsh discipline thing, but just knowing, hey, that's enough. That's what I can get done today. And being able to move into that wind down routine. We'll never get it all done. We're never going to get everything done. And that's good. And that's life. But that's also, as an entrepreneur, there's sticky notes and to-dos and calendar entries and all this stuff and a bazillion emails waiting for you. And there will continue to be, and more will come overnight. So if you prioritize yourself and put yourself first, your health first, you're going to perform better, and you're going to also have more clarity back to that other thing, like what is most important to me. You're going to be able to make better decisions.
Yeah, Sarah, you really remind me of one of my favorite concepts that I've ever read in a book. It's from one of my favorite authors, Seth Godin. He calls it the walk to Cleveland. And he says, most of us don't live in Cleveland, in this conversation. And he says, if you and I want to walk to Cleveland, all we can do today is wake up and start walking in the direction of Cleveland. We're not going to make it there. So then we need to go to sleep. And guess what we get to start doing again tomorrow? Start walking to Cleveland again. And I really love it. It's such a simple concept, but you called out the discipline that's required to support it. And that's really the hard part. But Sarah, I'm going to ask you this next question. I don't know how to phrase it perfectly, but I'm so excited to see how you navigate it. And that is, hearing you talk about these things, it just seems like you have such not only an intentional, but a really grounded approach to wellness, to leadership, to all of that. And a lot of people might think that, or assume that that's counter to being in the Army or being in the FBI, very high stress environments where a lot of things are out of your control. How did those professional experiences factor into the Sarah that's having this conversation with us today as a fellow entrepreneur?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's a really honest way of putting it, because maybe traditionally we weren't as focused on those things. I was in the Army a long, long time ago, and we had I'll just say I had, maybe I know others did too, but not collective, but I had a sleep when I'm dead mentality. And you can kind of get away with that for a little while, especially being younger. You could just use a gram more back into that day. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. But as we evolve as people, as we get additional responsibilities, we have to eventually realize some give and take, or we have something catastrophic happen, right? And so for me, that journey was a lot. That was not one big thing, but a lot of small things that came together, smaller important things. When I had kids, I still tried to do that. It's very difficult to do, raising toddlers. My husband had the same career as me, like just this constant tag team parenting and just this kind of being on edge, or, being a little bit frayed most of the time in my parenting. And I was with my kids, but I can't always say I was very present, because I had a lot of things that needed to be attended to, and my mind was often elsewhere. And so these are things I had never worked on. I worked on the things that were counted. I worked on the fitness. I worked on the job performance. But it took probably about 15 years into my FBI career that all of this eventually caught up with me, and it just started to, I noticed it was impacting me as a leader. And I realized I just needed to find a better way personally. So as I went on that journey and started trying out different things, a few of them worked. And as I started to change, others noticed it about me, and they commented and then asked for my help. Because I realized even in these very always on cultures where there is always more work to be done. And we really, in many circumstances, we can't be wrong. Most circumstances, like we can't be wrong, we can't miss. There's not a lot of luxury of things like failing forward or whatever, and so we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. These are environments in which incredibly conscientious people come in. And so we put a lot of pressure on ourselves and very high expectations of ourselves and each other. And for good reason. But I realized I was not the only person who was kind of struggling. And so then towards that latter part of my career, as I went through my own personal change, I started formalizing education and bringing these ideas to others. And it was great because it kind of coincided with the beginning of a change, I think, across a law enforcement culture where these things are being talked about a lot more, which is really, really nice. And now I work with other industries outside of law enforcement where these things are being talked about a lot more, recognizing those are human things. And it's for longevity, it's for our performance, but it's also for our life satisfaction and the collective good that we can bring.
Yeah, so it's really cool thinking about all those moments in life where we have inflection points. I was a math tutor in college, so I always think in terms of inflection points. And for me personally, like 2013, when I did experience burnout sparks change. You don't really have a choice at that moment in time. But what I find fascinating, both about my industry, quite frankly, as well as your industry, is that a lot of people are pushed into change. I interview a lot of entrepreneurs that the pandemic, a lot of layoffs happened, and people finally said, I'm going to start my business. Or when they have kids, they start realizing, I'd love to have more flexibility. There's so many of these catalysts that spark change. You work with a lot of different leaders and in all different career paths and all different backgrounds. What are some of those catalysts for them that make them put their stake in the ground and say, you know what, today is the day. I'm not going to wait for a January 1st or a hypothetical January 1st. I'm going to start taking control of my leadership, my energy, my stress management. What are some of those catalysts?
Yeah, so some of it could be life stages. Some of it is life stages, right? So maybe it is a parent who is now, they've got kids in the picture and they're realizing just the pull of having kids and how you balance things. Others are looking maybe like a later in their life changes, like a middle-age type thing, and you're starting to look out a little bit, like towards retirement and recognizing like, man, what do I want to be or do as I get to that stage? Much of it is people who are trying to help guide that next generation of leaders and be maybe the culture they were raised in their profession wasn't always the one that valued the things we're talking about. But now they recognize there's a needed shift, and they want to be able to be that person that can provide that mentorship for those that are coming after them and looking at the future. And so oftentimes it's something big or little, maybe smaller, but still significant life change that's going on in their life that is kind of helping them recognize, like, right, it might be time for a shift in how I take care of myself, how I lead, and what I do as I move forward.
Yeah, Sarah, I'm going to ask you to really take us behind the curtain here. And it's a big, broad question, but what does that work look like? A lot of people are probably hearing you talking and thinking, gosh, this sounds like deeply profound work. I don't even know how I'd go about that. What does it actually look like to go through it with you? What does it look like for the person on the receiving end to go through it internally? I'd love to hear some of that.
One of the things I'll do, if I'm working just with one person, we will start probably our second or so-ish conversation with really looking at where they want to be in X number of years in all aspects of their life, 5, 7, 3, depends, different factors lead into, but sometime out in the future, and setting kind of a vision, if you will, of how their life is at that point. For some, it's, I'm retired. I have a house in the mountains with apple trees, so we can pick apples. I can pick apples with my future grandkids and bake apple pie. Right? Like others, it is, I am at this whatever point I'm able to resume doing the things I did when I was younger, hiking or whatever. For others, it's just like I want to be healthy into my older years so I can continue to provide care for a family member that I'll always need to provide care for. Whatever it is, like setting that long-term goal, and then we just work backwards. And I work with them on what's most important right now, setting some middle goals, and then starting with some more short term. And then that's when you get into the normal SMART goal format and all that. You get into the real actionable things. Always feeling and going back to this vision that's pulling you forward, this compelling thing that's pulling you into your future, because that is your why. And so maybe it's how you lead, maybe it's how you parent, maybe it's what your future looks like, maybe it's the financial situation you're in, whatever it is, that's what you are really working for. And so that provides that energy. There you go, for driving through these short-term goals and working. And then it's just again, a prioritization of how much people want to do at a time, and in service of which of those goals. And then from there, the things we'll work on, are quite varied. I'm a nationally board certified health and wellness coach, so we could go into those areas. My personal experience, and I've got some training as well. The one thing that changed me more than anything else is meditation, mindfulness meditation. So we can dive into that with some others. It is getting really clear on your why and your purpose. Others still, it's relationships and working with different strategies on building relationships. Some of my other training and certification has been in the world of positive psychology. So a lot of that I go about helping people work with their strengths and identifying, but then working with and towards, their strengths and how that helps them with their challenges and being their best self. So it's varied once we get up close, but we start them helping to, where they're defining it. We're crafting it together, but it's all their vision of where they want to be at whatever time in the future.
Yeah, Sarah, I love the way you phrase that. You talk about getting up close, which obviously speaks to the fact that throughout the course of your work, you're zooming in and zooming out. And it's really that combination that I think is so important. One other thing I really want to call out as someone who is so appreciative of being on this side of the conversation with you is I love how much you speak towards prioritization. It's a word that pops up so frequently when you talk about this stuff because it's part of managing stress, managing wellness, managing all of these things is we got to put everything on the table and figure out how we're going to make it all fit, because quite frankly, we cannot do it all the time. And I love how much that factors into your work. So Sarah, I knew that time would fly by with you today, but I want to selfishly squeeze in 2 more questions with you.
Please.
And
Yes.
The first one is, I'm curious, with all of these experiences that have gotten you here and all of the work that you've done, both in your career, but also the work that you've done with your clients, how have you found it as an entrepreneur? Because you so correctly called out at the very top of our episode that your path here wasn't necessarily conventional. And so much of us, obviously a lot of listeners, relate to the entrepreneurial mindset, the entrepreneurial, your mind never stops thinking. How has that side of starting your business been for you?
Oh my gosh, it's super challenging. I working for the government for all those years, I think it was 32 total, is really interesting. You have a lot of flexibility in there, but also, if you need it, there's always someone to tell you the pathway forward, or a pathway forward. There's no shortage of advice and policy and regulations to follow, right? And so this world is completely different from that, and you just kind of got to figure it out on your own. And I realized recently, I did kind of a triple pivot. Many people who leave my profession of law enforcement go into security type work after they retire. Not all, by no means, but that seems a pretty common theme. And I went into the entrepreneurial route, which is very, very different. And so it's different people, it's a different profession. And I also moved back across the country. Now I moved to Idaho, where I had lived before, yet I'm now interacting with a different group of people entirely. So different people. And so it wasn't just like a 1 degree shift. It was a really big shift. So I've had to practice a lot of what I talk about, right? And that's probably why I'm so passionate about it, because I've experienced the benefits of it. Whenever I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to get that. I remind myself of the things like growth mindset, or using my strengths, or just taking a walk, or doing all the things. So it's not just things I'm preaching to others. It's discoveries I've made about myself, and then that's supported by literature or research or evidence-based, or anything external. But it's just finding these things that have worked for me as well. And so when it comes to me, that's what I do, is I just keep going back to those same things, and then really taking time to kind of appreciate those little moments of connection or appreciation or impact that you might have on another. I think that's really important as well. And that feedback and learning from others, also with it, their takeaways from you.
Yeah, I love that. Sarah, I'm hearing a lot of intentionality, a lot of mindfulness. You're right. All those things that we've talked about today, you're leaning on those same strategies that you help guide your clients through. And I think that that's so powerful, and it's such a powerful reminder. With all of that said, I have no idea how you're going to top any of that for this final question, because I would love for you to give listeners your best piece of advice for them, knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own personal and professional journeys, and also knowing that you're one of us, you are a fellow entrepreneur. What's that one piece of advice that you want to leave them with today?
Oh, wow. Man, gosh, it seems so contrary. I know you said one. Be open to surprises, maybe, and just the things, because, maybe be open to surprises, or be open to just new things, because the things that I'm working on now are not what I thought I'd be doing, or the communities I'm working with now are not necessarily what I thought I'd be doing when I started. And it's interesting trying to trace a line back to why I'm where I am now. Where it came from is a little surprising, and I never would have foreseen that. So I am grateful for the surprises, and a random phone call from someone in an industry that I didn't really know anything about, who's like, hey, you want to talk at this thing? And I'm like, okay, sure, sounds good. And where that's gone from here. And so I think those surprises are really powerful. And that comes down to having the space of being open to new things and learning, and all the other things we've talked about is opening yourself up for the good in the world.
Yes, I love that advice, Sarah. I knew I'd totally be putting you on the spot, but I also trusted and had faith that you'd navigate us to something really deep and meaningful for all of us in our own journeys, and you did exactly that. So I'm so appreciative of that advice. I also know that listeners are going to be so excited to check out more about your background, all the work that you're doing with your company, Leading Well Strategies. So drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Oh, absolutely. My website is leadingwellstrategies.com, and I'm on LinkedIn, Sarah G as in golf, Draper. And so those are the best ways to reach me. I just think through either of those. So through LinkedIn or through my website, and you could just email me at Sarah with an H at leadingwellstrategies.com.
Yes, I love that you grabbed that domain name. And listeners, you already know the drill. We're dropping all of those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Super easy to remember. You'll see Sarah's business name in this episode. It's leadingwellstrategies.com, but you don't have to remember it if you're driving, if you're at the gym, if you're in the shower, wherever you are. We're putting those links down below. So Sarah, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you, Brian. It's a true honor. And like you said, it will go fast. It really did. And I appreciate the time together.